You know how sometimes you really want to get a handle on something complex and interesting, but without wading through tons of like super dense material?
Yeah, you want the insights, the aha
Hmm.
moments, but, efficiently.
Exactly. That's what we try to do here. And today, we've got this really fascinating web of ideas we're going to unpack. Consider it a shortcut to getting properly well informed on something pretty cool.
We're diving deep into this idea of rewilding human intelligence. It's this concept of reconnecting with fundamental patterns in our food, our biology, our culture, even how we relate to the world.
Right. And part of that is looking at common sense, but not just in that simple, everyday way.
Mm.
We're talking about something deeper, almost like this innate biological, ecological wisdom, something our bodies know, the soil knows, even our stories hold. But maybe we've lost touch with it a bit.
Yeah, sort of drowned out by modern life, perhaps.
So for this deep dive, we've pulled together some foundational research. We're just calling it pasted text for reference. Think of it as the groundwork for a bigger conversation. Okay, so our mission today, pull out the key stuff, the really vital insights from this material. We want to show you the surprising links and hopefully give you some practical takeaways for, well, a more intelligent way of living.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
Let's start right inside us with the body itself, but not just as a machine, more like an ecosystem.
That's a great way to put it, a dynamic terrain. It's constantly being shaped by so much more than just food, right? Things like light, our emotions, our beliefs, even our community connections.
Which brings us to terrain theory. For anyone not familiar, the core idea is that our internal environment, our terrain, is actually the main factor in health. It's not just about avoiding germs.
Exactly. It's a more holistic view, kind of
Right.
contrasting with the purely germ-centric model. Goes back to people like Antoine Béchamp. It's about the conditions inside us.
And the gut is just central to this whole picture, isn't it? Like a key interface.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
And Dr. Alessio Fasano's work on zonulin was just groundbreaking here.
Ah, yes, zonulin. Remind us what that is again.
It's a protein that basically controls the tightness of the junctions between the cells lining our intestines. Think of it like the gatekeeper for the gut barrier.
And certain things can make it open those gates more.
Exactly. Dr. Fasano found that gluten, for instance, triggers zonulin release in pretty much everyone, although how much impact that has varies hugely between people. But when those gates loosen too much, that's leaky gut.
Right. And then things get through that shouldn't. Undigested food, bits of bacteria like LPS, other toxins, into the bloodstream.
Precisely. And Dr. Kiran Krishnan makes a powerful point. He sees the chronic, low-grade inflammation that often starts right there, with that leaky gut, as kind of ground zero for a huge number of modern health problems.
Wow, ground zero. That really puts it into perspective. It makes you see how all these different inputs, food, light, emotions, community, are constantly shaping that internal landscape.
They really are. It's a continuous dialogue.
Okay, let's dig into those inputs a bit more. Food obviously is a big one, but it's more than just calories, right?
Oh, absolutely. Food is information. It provides the raw materials for our gut microbes to work with, but it can also bring in disruptors. Think about all the stuff in ultra-processed foods, or even those compounds sometimes called anti-nutrients.
And light, we don't usually think of light as an input in the same way.
But it's fundamental. It sets our circadian rhythms, those internal body clocks governing so much, plus vitamin D synthesis, obviously. And there's even some really cutting-edge research looking at potential quantum biological effects of light on our cells. It's fascinating stuff.
It still feels a bit strange to think our feelings or beliefs can physically change our bodies.
It does, but the evidence is strong. Chronic psychological stress, negative beliefs. They translate into physiological changes. We see it in hormone levels, inflammatory markers, even gut permeability itself.
So stress can literally make your gut leakier.
It seems so. And then there's community, or the lack of it. Social connection or isolation directly impacts our stress response, our immune function, our overall resilience. It's all interconnected.
Okay, so this gut terrain is clearly crucial. Let's go back to leaky gut and inflammation.
Right, so the integrity of that gut lining is paramount.
Yeah.
When it gets too permeable leaky, that's the problem. Zonulin, as we said, is a key regulator, and gluten is a known trigger for zonulin release, though again, the effects vary wildly.
And if that barrier is compromised, the downstream effects can be pretty significant.
Very much so. That systemic low-grade inflammation it can cause has been linked to a whole host of things. Autoimmune conditions, some cancers, even neurological disorders. It's a long list.
And it's not just gluten causing the leakiness, right?
No, definitely not. Chronic stress is a big one, as we mentioned. Diets heavy in ultra-processed foods, imbalances in the gut bacteria dysbiosis, they all play a role.
You brought up histamine intolerance earlier as an example of terrain dysfunction. How does that fit in?
A perfect example, really. Histamine is vital. It does important jobs in immunity neurotransmission,
Hmm.
but it becomes a problem when we can't break it down properly when it builds up.
And there's an enzyme for that in the gut.
Yes, the main one is DAO diamine oxidase. Its job is to clear histamine from the gut. Now, some people have genetic variations that mean their DAO enzyme just isn't as efficient, like having a slower cleanup crew.
So they're naturally less able to handle histamine.
Exactly, their threshold is lower. And then the gut microbiome itself is involved too. Some bacteria actually produce histamine, while others help degrade it.
Ah, so it's a balance.
It really is. Now, if you've got leaky gut and inflammation, that can directly impair your DAO function. Plus, you might get more histamine-producing bacteria crossing the barrier, so the whole system gets overwhelmed. That histamine overload is what causes those diverse symptoms: headaches, hives, gut issues, fatigue.
And there are links between leaky gut markers like zonulin and these histamine-related conditions.
Yes, studies have shown correlations. Elevated zonulin has been linked to conditions like migraine and chronic spontaneous urticaria hives, where we know histamine is a major mediator. So histamine intolerance isn't just about histamine itself, it's often a sign of a compromised terrain, genetics, microbes, gut barrier failing to keep things in balance.
It really drives home how influential this internal environment is. Thinking about the microbes themselves, we often label them good or bad, but it sounds much more nuanced.
Oh, completely. They aren't fixed entities. Their behavior is incredibly plastic. It depends almost entirely on the host's terrain, the conditions they find themselves in. Stress, diet, inflammation. These things can make even normally helpful commensal microbes start acting in less helpful ways.
They adapt to their environment.
Exactly, like
Yeah.
that example with E. coli. Different strains have different ways of getting energy. If the gut environment changes, say, another dominant species like Clostridium perfringens starts hogging a particular nutrient, then maybe an E. coli strain that's good at scavenging tiny amounts of that nutrient will suddenly thrive while others fade. It's all about context.
And chronic stress is a huge context shifter for those microbes.
Massive. That constant HPA axis and sympathetic nervous system activation throws the immune system off kilter, directly changes the gut microbial composition, often leading to fewer beneficials. More potentially inflammatory types like proteobacteria, increases gut permeability, and just generally promotes inflammation. It really messes with the terrain.
And modern diets, especially the ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, same story, different driver. High UPF intake is consistently linked to lower microbial diversity, drops in key beneficials like Akkermansia and Faecalibacterium, an increase in pro-inflammatory microbes, and, surprise, surprise, increased gut permeability.
It's a feedback loop then. The terrain changes the microbes, and the microbes change the terrain.
Precisely. Leaky gut lets LPS in, causing inflammation. That inflammation might then favor histamine-producing bacteria, which increases histamine, potentially worsening inflammation, and maybe even impairing DAO function further. It cycles.
So just trying to kill off bad bugs or avoid toxins isn't really the answer.
It's part of it, maybe, minimizing harmful inputs, but it's insufficient on its own. You have to restore the integrity and function of the terrain itself, repair the lining, nurture beneficial microbes, make sure your own systems, like DAO enzyme function, are working well.
Right. That table you mentioned summarized the inputs. What were the key contrasts again?
It really laid out how whole foods tend to support gut lining integrity, feed good microbes, lower inflammation, and support cognition. Ultra-processed foods, on the other hand, tend to damage the gut barrier, favor less helpful microbes, drive inflammation, and can negatively impact brain function.
And the anti-nutrients.
Yeah, they were interesting. The effect really depends on the dose and the individual's gut health. In small amounts, in a healthy person, they might even be beneficial, that hormesis idea. But the table also drove home how things like light exposure, stress, beliefs, community, environmental toxins, they all feed into this complex equation influencing our gut, microbes, inflammation, and even how clearly we think.
Okay, let's unpack that anti-nutrient idea a bit more. They get a bad rap, but you're saying it's nuanced.
Very nuanced. Yes, compounds like phytates, oxalates, lectins, they can bind minerals or potentially trigger immune issues in sensitive people. That's true. But in the amounts usually found in a varied whole foods diet, For most healthy people, they might actually be beneficial through hormesis.
Hormesis, that's the idea that a small stress can be good.
Exactly. A little bit of something potentially harmful can trigger our body's own protective systems, like activating the NRF2 pathway, which ramps up antioxidant defenses. So these plant compounds act as mild stressors, making our cells more resilient.
And our gut microbes get involved too.
Massively. Our microbiome is like a chemical processing plant. Some bacteria make enzymes, like phytase, that break down phytic acid, freeing up minerals. They also transform polyphenols and other plant compounds into metabolites that can be even more active and beneficial for us.
Yeah.
But
It depends on which microbes you have.
precisely, it's totally context dependent. Your individual genetics matter, your overall gut health, the state of your terrain matters, the diversity and function of your specific microbiome matter, your whole diet matters, even how you cook your food matters. Soaking, sprouting, fermenting. These can drastically reduce levels of these compounds.
So for someone with a really compromised gut, maybe these compounds are more problematic.
Potentially, yes. But for someone with a robust, healthy terrain, they can be part of a beneficial diet, contributing through hormesis and feeding good bugs. It's all about that dynamic ecosystem, that negotiation between host and microbe.
Okay, this internal terrain focus makes so much sense. Let's shift gears now, moving kind of outwards to how we perceive things, how we make choices, especially around food. You call this part rewilding perception, reclaiming agency.
Yeah, because our food choices aren't just driven by biology. There are these incredibly powerful non-physiological forces at play: unconscious narratives, cultural influences, our sense of identity, and increasingly algorithmic manipulation.
It's so true when you think about it. Comfort food, family traditions, food as part of our identity.
No.
It's not just about nutrients.
Not at all. And then we have cognitive biases tripping us up, like cognitive dissonance, that discomfort when our actions, say eating junk food, clash with our beliefs about eating healthily. So we subconsciously rationalize the junk food choice to reduce the discomfort.
Yeah, been there. What about identity protective cognition?
That's when our food choices are so tied up with who we think we are or the groups we belong to that we actively resist information that challenges those choices. We might engage in motivated reasoning, only looking for stuff that confirms our beliefs, or even motivated ignorance, actively avoiding contradictory facts. The classic meat paradox, loving animals but eating meat, involves a lot of this mental juggling.
And we build stories around our food choices.
We do. Personal stories, cultural narratives about what's good or bad or natural food. And these stories can be incredibly hard to change.
Which leads sometimes to things like orthorexia.
Exactly. Orthorexia nervosa starts innocently, wanting to eat healthily, but it can spiral into this obsession with food purity. It leads to extreme restriction, deficiencies, social isolation, real distress, and it has overlaps with OCD features.
And online groups can sometimes worsen that.
They can, unintentionally. These online dietary tribes, while offering support, can sometimes create echo chambers, reinforcing rigid rules and an us versus them mentality that can fuel orthorexic tendencies.
And layered on top of all that is the attention economy.
Right. Cal Newport talks about this relentless competition for our focus. Food media, digital marketing, social media algorithms, they're all vying for our attention and shaping our desires using incredibly sophisticated methods. Influencers, native advertising that looks like regular content, personalized targeting, it's everywhere, and it heavily influences what we, especially younger people, want to eat.
They're basically engineering our desires.
Pretty much. Newport makes this brilliant comparison between ultra-processed foods and ultra-processed content. Both are engineered for maximum palatability and engagement. They hijack our reward pathways, potentially dulling our ability to sense our own internal cues, whether that's satiety signals or our intuition about what information is truly valuable.
And this leads to the algorithmic self.
Yeah, the idea that our internal narratives, our very desires, are being subtly shaped by external profit-driven algorithms. We end up kind of outsourcing our own innate wisdom about what we need.
Okay, that's a bit bleak. How do we push back? How do we reclaim that agency? You mentioned psychedelics and ritual as possibilities.
Yeah, two very different but potentially powerful avenues for disrupting these ingrained patterns. There's growing research suggesting psychedelics, like psilocybin, might help by temporarily disrupting those rigid thought patterns and narratives. The Rebus model suggests they sort of relax our top-down beliefs, allowing more bottom-up sensory info and new perspectives to come through, enhancing flexibility and maybe interoception, sensing our internal state.
And there's research in eating disorders.
Preliminary, yes. Exploring their potential for compulsive eating patterns. Plus, there's this fascinating idea of a gut-brain psychedelic axis, suggesting the microbiome might influence how we respond, and vice versa.
Okay, and ritual, how does that fit in?
Rituals, whether personal or communal, bring intention and mindfulness to eating. Simple things. Consciously preparing food, eating together without screens, expressing gratitude. It elevates eating from a mindless habit to a meaningful act.
So it counters the automatic, unconscious patterns.
Exactly. Rituals provide structure, reduce anxiety, foster connection to the food, its source, the people we share it with. Many ancestral cultures use ritual to embed ecological wisdom and cultural values around food.
So both psychedelics in a therapeutic context, obviously, and ritual offer ways to step outside our conditioned responses, our identity protective defenses, and maybe reevaluate our relationship with food from a more embodied place.
That's the potential, yes, to temporarily disconnect from the algorithmic self and tap back into a more intuitive, embodied wisdom about what truly nourishes us.
This really opens up the conversation beyond just biology. Okay, next you took us into quantum biology and fine-tuning. This sounds like a big leap.
It is conceptually. It's exploring the edge of our understanding, asking if life operates using principles beyond classical physics and chemistry. It touches on quantum phenomena in biology and this mind-bending idea that the universe itself seems exquisitely fine-tuned for life.
Quantum mechanics in us. How?
Well, one key example is quantum tunneling in enzymes. Enzymes speed up reactions, right? Tunneling allows particles, like electrons or protons, to pass through energy barriers they shouldn't classically be able to cross. This is vital for many metabolic reactions to happen at body temperature.
Wow, okay. What else?
Quantum coherence in photosynthesis. Plants are incredibly efficient at capturing light. Coherence allows the energy and excitant to essentially explore multiple paths simultaneously to find the quickest route to the reaction center. It's almost like it's computing the best path.
That's amazing. Any other examples?
Biophoton emissions these ultra-weak light signals from cells, especially neurons. Their exact role is debated, but could involve intercellular communication, signaling health or damage, and maybe even quantum entanglement playing a role in maintaining biological order over large scales within an organism.
It feels like a whole hidden layer of reality. You also mentioned rhythmic harmony.
Yeah, this connects back to our environment. Life isn't isolated, it's tuned to Earth's rhythms. Circadian light cycles don't just affect sleep, they orchestrate mitochondrial function, energy production, repair. Disrupting those rhythms has huge metabolic consequences.
And things like structured water or Earth's magnetic fields.
Exactly. Some researchers, like Mei-Wan Ho, propose that water inside our cells exists in an ordered, structured state, crucial for quantum coherence and efficient energy transfer. And things like the Schumann resonances, natural electromagnetic frequencies in the Earth's atmosphere that overlap with our brainwave, that's the billion-dollar question. The anthropic principle is one attempt to grapple with it, basically saying, well, we observe the universe to be this way because if it weren't this way, we wouldn't be here to observe it.
Yeah.
But it feels profound.
It does. And you link this to entropy and how life maintains order.
Right. Entropy is the tendency towards disorder. The universe is running down, becoming more random, but life is this island of incredible order and complexity. Schrödinger said life feeds on negentropy. It takes an ordered energy like sunlight or food, uses it to maintain its own complex structure, and exports disorder like heat and waste.
And our cells are constantly fighting entropy.
Constantly. DNA repair systems fixing mutations, protein quality control systems folding proteins correctly or moving damaged ones. It's a continuous battle against decay. Chronic stress, toxins, poor diet. They overwhelm these systems, leading to more damage, more entropy. That's essentially aging and disease at a cellular level.
So it's like the universe is fine-tuned for life, and life itself is fine-tuned to harness quantum effects and maintain order against entropy.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Our biological rhythms, our sensitivity to natural cycles. Maybe these are ways life stays synchronized, maintains coherence, resists that slide into disorder. And maybe our modern artificial environments are disrupting that deep coherence. It really makes you wonder about consciousness itself. Maybe it's not just an emergent property, but something fundamental to a universe geared towards awareness.
Mind blown. Okay, let's bring this back down to earth, literally. The final section was about rebuilding systems from the soil up, moving towards regenerative culture.
Yes, shifting focus to practical action. How do we create food systems, social systems that are decentralized, reciprocal, regenerative, and it starts with the soil?
You talked about the fragility of our current industrial monocultures in food, but also parallels in media and medicine, and how this links to soil degradation.
Yeah, that industrial monocrop, synthetic inputs, heavy tilling it, a delivered yield, yes,
Yeah.
but at a huge cost.
Hmm.
Nutrient depletion in the soil and thus our food, loss of carbon and organic matter, erosion, compaction, loss of biodiversity, contamination. It's a mess.
Hidden hunger, getting enough calories but not enough micronutrients.
Exactly. And you see echoes in media echo chambers or one-size-fits-all medicine. We've prioritized efficiency over resilience and diversity. Degraded soil is almost a physical metaphor for degraded internal terrains or degraded information ecosystems.
So what's the alternative? How do we build resilience?
It starts with local feedback, community gardens, CSAs, mutual aid kitchens, food co-ops.
Mm.
These shorten supply chains, build community trust. Agriculturally, it's practices that build soil, no-till, cover crops, diverse rotations, integrating animals maybe. It's about working with natural processes.
And cooperation becomes key, not just competition.
Absolutely. Game theory shows that in the long run, cooperation and reciprocity often lead to better outcomes for everyone involved. Trust is the currency of resilient systems, whether social, microbial, or ecological.
And nature is full of cooperative examples.
Totally. Mycorrhizal fungi networks, the wood wide web, connecting trees, sharing nutrients, signaling, it's incredible cooperation. And our own gut microbiome. A diverse gut community works together for digestion, vitamin production, immune training, defense. It's cooperative intelligence. Functional redundancy, having multiple microbes that can do similar jobs, is key to stability, just like in healthy soil.
So the future is more decentralized. Open source food, media, maybe even governance.
That's the trajectory many are exploring. Community seed banks fighting for seed sovereignty, like Vandana Shiva's work, applying open source principles to food systems for transparency, even exploring things like DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations using blockchain for potentially more transparent supply chains or direct farmer-consumer links. It's about distributing power, fostering participation.
And food sovereignty and cognitive sovereignty are linked.
Deeply. The ability to control your food system and the ability to think for yourself, resist manipulation. Both rely on decentralization, valuing local knowledge, rebuilding trust, moving away from opaque top-down systems.
That final table you mentioned summarized these regenerative principles across different systems.
Yeah, it showed how decentralization, biodiversity, cooperation, resilience through redundancy, and nutrient cycling look in soil, in the gut, in food systems, and in information culture. It's about applying similar ecological patterns across the board.
Okay, this has been a huge journey, connecting our gut microbes to quantum physics, to community gardens. You synthesized it all as the return of common sense.
Yeah, but not common sense as in simplistic thinking, and definitely not nostalgia. It's about reawakening a deeper biological, ecological intelligence,
Yeah.
that pattern fluency.
What does pattern fluency look like day to day?
It's things like eating with the seasons in your locality, connecting to those rhythms, getting diverse nutrients and microbes, sleeping with the sun, honoring your circadian clock for hormonal, metabolic, mental health. It's recognizing healing often involves rhythm and ritual fasting feasting, activity cycles, and deep connection to self, community, nature.
And rebuilding trust.
Inside and out, cultivating a diverse gut microbiome, an ecosystem of trust within, and extending that outward supporting food systems built on trust, strengthening community bonds, moving from opaque systems to reciprocal ones.
So this common sense revival is about rewilding our intelligence, reclaiming our ability to see the patterns, live in harmony.
Exactly. A return to embodied wisdom. Understanding health not as the absence of disease, but as this vibrant property of a well-tended terrain, internal and external. It's the path to individual well-being, community regeneration, and planetary health.
And the key takeaways from the report underpinning this were
The primacy of the terrain. Pattern recognition over rigid optimization, biological individuality and ecological memory, the power of narrative and algorithms, quantum biology and fine-tuning hinting at deeper connections, and the need for regenerative systems, starting with the soil.
This has been incredibly insightful, really connects the dots in ways I hadn't considered. Thank you for walking us through it.
My pleasure. It's fascinating stuff and really important to think about, I believe.
And a huge thank you to you for joining us on this deep dive. We covered a lot of ground: food, biology, culture, ecology, all tangled together. We really hope it gave you some of those aha moments, maybe a new way to look at your own health and how you connect with the world.
And maybe just one final thought to mull over this week. Is there one small way you could consciously reconnect with a natural rhythm? The sun, the seasons, maybe even just the soil in a park or garden or a local ecosystem. Just pay attention. What subtle patterns, what quiet wisdom might you notice?